Ambassador Park Min-ho walked slowly through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers. His footsteps echoed in the enormous crystal hall on Nexus Prime. This was humanity's biggest moment, the chance to join the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Min-ho had spent months preparing for this presentation. He carried with him Earth's best achievements, their technological advances, and their hopes for peaceful cooperation among the stars. The chamber was breathtaking. Walls made of living crystals stretched up hundreds of meters, pulsing with soft, blue light. Floating platforms held representatives from dozens of alien species, each more incredible than the last. The Korthak warriors stood like mountains of chitinous armor, their forearms crossed as they watched with cold eyes. The Veilnari floated like ghosts made of pure energy, shifting between colors as they communicated through light patterns. Ancient architects, beings of living silicon that had existed for millions of years, sat motionless like statues carved from precious stones. At the center of it all sat High Chancellor Veltara of the Zephyrian Empire. Her species looked somewhat humanoid, but with skin that shimmered like metal and eyes that glowed with inner fire. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. Behind her stood the symbols of the 17 star systems her empire had conquered in just the past century. Min-ho began his presentation with confidence. He showed holographic displays of Earth's space stations, their fusion drives that could travel between planets, their peaceful exploration missions that had mapped nearby solar systems. He talked about human art, music, and literature. He spoke about humanity's desire to learn from other species and share their own knowledge. But as he spoke, Min-ho noticed something troubling. The aliens weren't impressed. They were amused. The Korthak warriors made clicking sounds that served as their laughter. The Veilnari's colors shifted to patterns that clearly showed mockery. Even the ancient architects, who rarely showed emotion, seemed to be shaking slightly in what could only be silent laughter. When Min-ho finished his presentation, High Chancellor Veltara rose from her throne. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had never been challenged. "Ambassador Park Min-ho of Earth," she began, her tone dripping with barely contained contempt. "The Galactic Council has reviewed your species' application for membership." The chamber fell silent. Every alien representative turned their attention to the Chancellor's words. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future among the stars. "Your species shows potential," Veltara continued, "and several aliens made sounds that were clearly suppressed giggles. However, the Council finds that humanity is not yet ready for full membership. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. Your fastest ships would take decades to travel distances that our vessels cover in days. Your weapons are based on throwing metal projectiles using chemical explosions, techniques that most civilized species abandoned thousands of years ago." The insults continued. Veltara criticized humanity's reliance on biological crews instead of advanced artificial intelligence systems. She mocked their fusion power when other species had mastered zero-point energy. She laughed at their planetary governments when galactic civilizations had evolved beyond such crude political systems. Therefore, the Chancellor announced with a cruel smile, "Humanity will be granted observer status only. You may watch our proceedings and learn from your betters, but you will have no voice in galactic affairs until you prove yourselves worthy." The decision hit Min-ho like a physical blow. Observer status was essentially meaningless, a polite way of saying humanity wasn't good enough to sit at the adult table. They could watch but not participate, listen but not speak, learn but not contribute. As the human delegation prepared to leave, walking back through those massive crystal doors, the chamber erupted behind them. The sound of alien laughter, clicks, chirps, harmonic tones, and electromagnetic pulses filled the air. The Zephyrians were particularly loud in their mockery. They found it hilarious that humans still used gunpowder-based weapons when civilized. Species had moved on to plasma and quantum technologies centuries ago. They couldn't understand why humans insisted on keeping biological crews when machines were so much more efficient and reliable. But as Ambassador Park Min-ho walked toward his simple fusion drive ship, something strange happened. Instead of looking defeated, he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that carried weight, the smile of someone who knew something others didn't. The aliens in that crystal chamber had no idea about human history. They didn't know about the countless wars where technologically superior forces had been defeated by supposedly primitive enemies. They hadn't studied the battles where advanced civilizations fell to opponents they had dismissed as backward and harmless. They couldn't comprehend that throughout human history, being underestimated had consistently proven to be the last mistake their enemies ever made. As the human ship departed Nexus Prime, heading back toward the small blue planet that spawned them, the laughter continued to echo through the council chambers. The galaxy's most powerful species had just made a judgment about humanity based on incomplete information. They would soon learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you don't take seriously. 6 months after humanity's humiliation at the Galactic Council, the Zephyrian Empire was riding high on their success. High Chancellor Veltara had decided it was time for their most ambitious military campaign yet. The target was the Perseus arm of the galaxy, a region filled with dozens of smaller civilizations that had never experienced the full might of Zephyrian military power. High. Admiral Korvash stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Stellar Dominion. The ship was a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering, stretching over 2 kilometers in length and bristling with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Its hull was made from quantum-bonded metals that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. Its shields could deflect energy beams that could melt planets. Most importantly, its weapon systems included plasma lance destroyers that could cut through asteroid belts and quantum torpedo cruisers that could crack moons in half. Korvash was a veteran of 17 successful conquest campaigns. He had never lost a battle, never faced an enemy that could stand against Zephyrian technology for more than a few hours. His strategy was always the same and always effective: arrive at a system with overwhelming force, demonstrate superior firepower, and watch as the local species either surrendered immediately or got obliterated trying to resist. The first phase of the Perseus Arm campaign went exactly as planned. The Stellar Dominion and its fleet of 200 warships arrived at the Kepler 442 system, home to an insectoid species that had achieved basic spaceflight, but nothing more advanced. The Kepler colonists took one look at the Zephyrian fleet and immediately transmitted their unconditional surrender. They offered tribute, resources, and complete obedience to the Empire. Korvash didn't even need to fire a single shot. The next target was the Trappist system, where aquatic civilizations had built underwater cities on 7 different water worlds. These beings had developed interesting biotechnology and could live both underwater and in space, but their weapons were still based on pressurized water cannons and organic projectiles. When the Zephyrian fleet appeared in their system, the Ida aquatic leaders gathered for emergency council meetings in their deepest ocean trenches. After 3 days of debate, they chose the same path as the Kepler colonies: complete surrender rather than certain annihilation. World after world fell. Into line as news of the Zephyrian advance spread faster than their actual fleet movements. The silicon-based miners of Proxima Centauri offered their entire mineral wealth. The crystalline beings of Wolf 359 transmitted complex mathematical equations that served as their formal surrender documents. The gas giant dwellers of Barnard's Star evacuated their cloud cities and retreated out of the deepest layers of their atmosphere, hoping to avoid Zephyrian notice entirely. Admiral Korvash grew more confident with each easy victory. He began to think this campaign might be completed ahead of schedule, allowing him to return to the core worlds as a hero who had expanded the Empire's territory by 30% without losing a single ship. His crew shared his confidence, spending their off-duty hours planning victory celebrations and choosing which conquered worlds they wanted to visit during shore leave. But as the Zephyrian fleet pushed deeper into the Perseus Arm, strange things began to happen. At first, they were small incidents that seemed unimportant. Scout vessels on the edges of the fleet started reporting brief sensor contacts, ships or objects that appeared for a few seconds and then vanished without using any recognizable faster-than-light drive signatures. When the scouts tried to investigate these contacts, they found nothing but empty space. The fleet's quantum communication networks, which allowed instant communication across hundreds of light years, began experiencing periodic disruptions. Messages would arrive garbled or delayed. Sometimes entire conversations would disappear from the communication logs as if they had never happened. The fleet's communication officers ran diagnostic after diagnostic, but couldn't find any technical problems with their equipment. Most disturbing of all were the reports from the ship's artificial intelligence systems. These were some of the most advanced computers in the galaxy, capable of processing billions of calculations per second and managing every aspect of ship operations. But they started reporting computational anomalies, strange patterns in their data processing that suggested someone or something was accessing their systems and studying their operations. The AI systems couldn't identify the source of these intrusions, but they could detect that their own capabilities were being analyzed and catalogued by an unknown intelligence. The ship's technical officers were baffled. Their security systems showed no signs of hacking or unauthorized access. Their firewalls were intact, their encryption was unbroken, and their isolation protocols were functioning perfectly. Yet somehow something was learning about their technology, their tactics and their capabilities, without leaving any trace of how it was doing so. Junior officers began whispering about ghost ships and phantom signals. Some crew members reported feeling like they were being watched during their shifts, even when they were alone in secure sections of the ship. The ship's psychologists noted an increase in anxiety and paranoia among the crew, but they attributed it to the stress of a long campaign in unfamiliar territory. Admiral Korvash dismissed all these reports as the paranoid fantasies of crews who had been too long in deep space. He had seen this before during extended military campaigns. Isolated soldiers and sailors always started imagining threats that didn't exist. What could possibly threaten the mighty Zephyrian Empire in this remote region of primitive species? The humans were hundreds of light years away, still licking their wounds from their diplomatic humiliation. The other local species had already surrendered or hidden themselves in fear. The Admiral had no idea that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity was watching, learning, and preparing. The ghost contacts his scouts were reporting were real. The communication disruptions were deliberate. The AI anomalies were evidence of human intelligence gathering operations that made Zephyrian technology look like children's toys. Humanity had been underestimated once again, and they were about to turn that mistake into the Zephyrian Empire's greatest nightmare. The Zephyrian advance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Tau Ceti system with their usual arrogant confidence. Admiral Korvash stood on the bridge of his flagship, scanning the system through the massive viewing screens. This was supposed to be another routine stop in their conquest campaign: intimidate the locals, accept their surrender, and move on to the next target. The system looked exactly like their intelligence reports had predicted. Tau Ceti was a quiet star system, with several rocky planets and a modest asteroid belt. On the fourth planet, Tau Ceti E, their sensors detected a small human research facility. The base appeared to house maybe 50 people, with basic life support, systems and what looked like scientific equipment. There were no visible weapons, no military installations, no defensive shields. Just another primitive human outpost, conducting whatever simple research their limited technology allowed. Korvash smiled with satisfaction. After weeks of strange sensor contacts and mysterious communication disruptions, it felt good to find something normal and predictable. Here was a target he could understand. A small, defenseless human facility that would surrender immediately when faced with Zephyrian military might. It would be a perfect opportunity to send a message to any other humans in the region about what happened to species that didn't know their place in the galactic order. The Admiral ordered 3 of his heavy cruisers to accompany him to the human outpost. These ships were each the size of city blocks, armed with plasma cannons that could melt through a kilometer of solid rock and protected by energy shields that had never been penetrated by any known weapon. Together with his flagship, they represented enough firepower to destroy an entire planetary civilization. As the 4 massive Zephyrian warships approached Tau Ceti E, they transmitted the standard intimidation message on all frequencies. The message was simple and had been used successfully hundreds of times before: surrender immediately and accept Zephyrian rule, or face complete annihilation. The ships positioned themselves in a threatening formation around the small human base, their weapons powered up and ready to demonstrate their overwhelming superiority. The response came from the human facility on what the Zephyrians considered a hilariously primitive radio frequency. The voice belonged to a woman who identified herself as Dr. Kim Hana, the outpost commander. Her tone was calm and professional, showing no fear despite facing 4 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. "Admiral Korvash," she said somehow. Knowing his name even though the Zephyrians hadn't identified themselves, "We appreciate your visit to our research facility. Before you make any hasty decisions about our fate, perhaps you'd like to see what we've been working on out here, in this quiet little system." The Admiral almost laughed out loud. What could these primitive humans possibly show him that would be of any interest? Their most advanced technology was centuries behind Zephyrian standards. Their weapons were based on throwing metal bullets using chemical explosions. Their ships couldn't even travel faster than light without using crude fusion drives that took months to travel between star systems. "You have 30 seconds to surrender unconditionally," Korvash replied through his ship's communication system. "After that, we will demonstrate why resistance against the Zephyrian Empire is futile." Dr. Kim Hana's transmission ended without another word. The human base went silent. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The Zephyrian ships maintained their threatening positions, weapons charged and ready to turn the human facility into a crater. Korvash counted down the seconds, preparing to give the order to fire a warning shot that would vaporize a nearby mountain and show the humans what they were facing. Then, exactly 30 seconds after Dr. Kim Hana's transmission ended, Admiral Korvash's universe changed forever. The asteroid belt around Tau Ceti exploded into motion. What the Zephyrians had dismissed as nothing more than space rocks and cosmic debris suddenly revealed itself as the most sophisticated weapons network ever constructed. Hundreds of objects that had looked like ordinary asteroids began moving with purpose and precision. Their surfaces, which had appeared to be natural rock and ice, split open to reveal hidden machinery inside. Mass drivers, electromagnetic launchers, that had been disguised as asteroid mining equipment, began firing kinetic kill vehicles at velocities that should have been impossible. These weren't the primitive chemical projectiles the Zephyrians had mocked, but tungsten penetrators accelerated to significant fractions of light speed by magnetic fields that made Zephyrian technology look like stone tools. The first impacts hit Korvash's escort cruisers before their sensors could even register the incoming projectiles. The kinetic energy of objects moving at relativistic speeds was beyond anything the Zephyrian shields had been designed to handle. Energy shields that could deflect plasma beams and absorb laser attacks were completely useless against solid matter. Moving at such incredible velocities, the heavy cruiser Domination took 3 tungsten rods through its main hull before its crew even realized they were under attack. The projectiles passed through the ship's shields as if they weren't there, punched through armor that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons, and carved devastating channels through the ship's interior. Secondary explosions began tearing the massive vessel apart from the inside. The cruiser Supremacy tried to maneuver away from the incoming fire, but the kinetic projectiles had been fired with mathematical precision. There was nowhere to run. A single tungsten penetrator struck the ship's main reactor, and the resulting explosion lit up the Tau Ceti system like a miniature star. Admiral Korvash watched in horror as his supposedly invincible warships were torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have existed. His own flagship, the Stellar Dominion, shuddered under multiple impacts that sent shockwaves through its massive hull. Damage reports flooded in from across the ship. Hull breaches, system failures, crew casualties from impacts that had penetrated the most advanced armor in the Zephyrian fleet. As his bridge crew frantically tried to coordinate defensive measures against an attack they didn't understand, Admiral Korvash finally realized the truth. The strange sensor contacts his scouts had been reporting weren't paranoid fantasies. They were evidence of human ships, that had been studying Zephyrian technology for months. The communication disruptions weren't equipment failures. They were signs of human intelligence operations that had learned everything about Zephyrian capabilities and weaknesses. In that moment of clarity, as his flagship buckled under impacts from weapons that combined primitive kinetics with advanced physics, Admiral Korvash finally understood why Ambassador Park Min-ho had smiled so sadly during the Galactic Council's mockery. The humans hadn't been asking for protection from the galaxy's more advanced species. They had been quietly offering protection to a galaxy that was about to learn what happened when you underestimated humanity. The emergency alert sirens wailed through the crystal spires of the Zephyrian capital world as High Chancellor Veltara received the impossible news. Admiral Korvash's advance fleet, 3 heavy cruisers and a flagship that represented the pinnacle of Zephyrian military engineering, had been completely destroyed by humans. Not damaged, not defeated in a lengthy battle, but utterly annihilated. In less than 20 minutes by a species they had dismissed as primitive cave dwellers. Veltara stormed into the emergency council chamber, her metallic skin flickering with the angry red patterns that indicated extreme agitation in her species. Around the circular table sat her top military advisors, intelligence chiefs and fleet commanders. Each of them looked as stunned as she felt. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 star systems without losing a single major warship, and now 3 of their most advanced vessels had been destroyed by beings who still used gunpowder. "Explain this to me," Veltara demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been challenged. "How did primitive humans, with their ancient kinetic weapons, destroy ships protected by quantum shields and armor that can withstand plasma bombardment?" Admiral Lee Ji-won, the Empire's chief military strategist, activated a holographic display showing the battle data recovered from the Stellar Dominion's escape pod. The images were shocking. Asteroids that should have been lifeless rocks had opened like flowers to reveal hidden weapons systems. Mass drivers that shouldn't have existed fired projectiles at velocities that violated every assumption about human technological capabilities. "The humans didn't use primitive weapons, Chancellor," Admiral Lee explained, his voice tight with professional concern. "They used kinetic projectiles, yes, but accelerated to relativistic speeds using magnetic field technology that we've never seen before. Our shields are designed to deflect energy weapons, plasma beams, laser cannons, particle accelerators. They were never intended to stop solid matter moving at significant fractions of light speed." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrian military doctrine was based on energy weapons and defensive systems optimized for the type of warfare that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years. Kinetic weapons had been abandoned by most civilizations because they were considered inefficient and primitive. The humans had taken that assumption and turned it into a devastating tactical advantage. Intelligence Director Park Soo-min stood up, her expression grim. "Chancellor, our analysis suggests this wasn't a random encounter. The entire Tau Ceti system had been converted into a weapons platform. Those asteroids didn't just happen to contain mass drivers. They were deliberately placed and disguised over a period of months or possibly years. The humans have been planning this for a long time." Veltara's anger intensified. The idea that primitive humans had been secretly preparing to fight the Zephyrian Empire was insulting beyond measure. "How is that possible? Our intelligence networks monitor all significant military buildups in this sector. How did they hide such extensive preparations?" "They used our own assumptions against us," Director Park replied. "Our sensors look for energy signatures, advanced materials, and technological patterns that match known military installations. The humans built their weapons using materials and methods that our systems classified as industrial mining equipment or scientific research facilities. By the time we realized what we were looking at, it was too late. The Chancellor's response was swift and predictably violent. If the humans wanted to play war games with the Zephyrian Empire, she would show them what real military power looked like. She ordered the immediate deployment of the Empire's home fleet, over 200 warships, including 5 planet-killer dreadnoughts that could crack worlds in half with their gravitational manipulation weapons. "We will make an example of Earth that will be remembered for 1,000 years," Veltara declared. Every species in the galaxy will learn what happens to primitives who dare to challenge Zephyrian supremacy. But as the home fleet prepared for departure, intelligence reports began flooding in that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of what they would face. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive changes throughout Earth's solar system. What had once appeared to be a modest collection of research outposts and mining operations had been revealed as something far more sinister. Every asteroid in the solar system showed signs of modification. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, containing millions of rocks ranging from pebbles to small moons, had been transformed into the largest weapons platform ever constructed. Each asteroid contained hidden mass drivers, camouflaged missile silos, or stealth communication arrays that could coordinate attacks across impossible distances. The moons of Jupiter, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, housed interplanetary mass drivers capable of hurling projectiles across the entire solar system with devastating accuracy. What the Zephyrians had dismissed as simple mining operations were actually the construction sites for weapons that could strike targets orbiting any planet in the system within hours. Saturn's rings presented an even more sophisticated threat. The countless ice particles and rocks that formed the planet's beautiful ring system concealed thousands of stealth platforms. These platforms were virtually invisible to conventional sensors, designed to look like natural debris until they activated their weapon systems. Each platform could deploy swarms of kinetic interceptors or coordinate with other platforms to create overlapping fields of fire. Most unsettling of all were the reports from deep space surveillance networks throughout Zephyrian territory. Human ships, not the simple fusion drive vessels they had shown the Galactic Council, but sleek predators that moved through space with impossible stealth, had been detected in systems hundreds of light years from Earth. These ships appeared and disappeared without using conventional faster-than-light drives, somehow moving through space in ways that violated known physics. The humans hadn't just been preparing to defend their home system, they had been positioning themselves throughout Zephyrian space for a counteroffensive that could strike at the heart of the Empire itself. While the Zephyrians had been laughing at human primitiveness, human intelligence operatives had been mapping every important military installation, supply depot and communication hub in the Empire. Admiral Kim Tae-hyun, the fleet's tactical specialist, studied the intelligence reports with growing unease. "Chancellor, this isn't just a defensive network. The humans have created a strategic weapons system that can project power across interstellar distances. They've been studying our fleet movements, our communication protocols, our tactical doctrines. They know everything about how we fight, but we know almost nothing about their true capabilities." Veltara refused to be intimidated by human tricks and deceptions. "They're still primitives using primitive weapons," she insisted. "Numbers and technological superiority will prevail. Deploy the home fleet immediately. We will crush this human rebellion and show the galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire cannot be challenged." But as the massive fleet prepared to depart for Earth, many of the experienced commanders privately wondered if they were sailing into a trap that had been centuries in the making. The humans had just demonstrated that being underestimated was their greatest weapon, and the Zephyrian Empire was about to learn why that had always been a fatal mistake throughout human history. The Zephyrian home fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like an armada of death. Over 200 warships, including 5 planet-killer dreadnoughts each the size of a small city, arranged themselves in perfect battle formation. High Chancellor Veltara stood on the bridge of her flagship Eternal Dominance, expecting to see a terrified human civilization desperately transmitting surrender messages and begging for mercy. Instead, she found silence. No panicked communications, no frantic evacuation attempts, no diplomatic overtures. The solar system appeared almost empty, with only the normal background chatter of civilian traffic and scientific stations. It was as if the humans were completely unaware that the most powerful military force in the galaxy had just arrived to destroy them. "Begin the intimidation display," Veltara commanded. "Charge all weapon systems and target their major population centers. When they see what they're facing, they'll surrender quickly enough." But as the Zephyrian fleet advanced deeper into the solar system, Admiral Kim Min-seo began to feel uneasy. His tactical sensors were picking up strange readings from throughout the system. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter showed unusual electromagnetic signatures. The moons of the outer planets were generating energy patterns that didn't match their supposed mining and research operations. Most disturbing of all, his deep space scanners couldn't get clear readings on anything beyond the orbit of Mars. "Chancellor," Admiral Kim reported, "our sensor networks are experiencing significant interference. It's as if something is actively jamming our reconnaissance systems while simultaneously studying our fleet composition and capabilities." Veltara dismissed his concerns with an angry gesture. "Human desperation tactics. They're trying to delay the inevitable with primitive electronic warfare. Continue the advance. We'll be in firing range of Earth within 6 hours." But the humans weren't delaying anything. They were waiting for the perfect moment to spring the most sophisticated trap in military history. As the Zephyrian fleet passed the orbit of Jupiter, Dr. Lee Yuna gave the signal from her command center, hidden deep beneath the surface of Europa. "All stations, this is command. Execute protocol tsunami." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The entire solar system erupted into coordinated violence on a scale that defied comprehension. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris that the Zephyrians had dismissed as harmless suddenly revealed its true nature as part of an integrated weapons network. The asteroid belt became a storm of kinetic projectiles. Millions of tungsten rods, each accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, created a deadly cloud of relativistic metal that no shield technology could stop. The Zephyrian ships found themselves flying through a three-dimensional minefield where every direction offered nothing but certain death. Jupiter's moons opened fire with mass drivers that hurled asteroid-sized projectiles across interplanetary distances. These weren't precision weapons aimed at individual ships, but area denial systems designed to fill entire regions of space with fast-moving destruction. Zephyrian vessels that tried to maneuver away from one attack found themselves flying directly into another. Saturn's rings proved to be the most devious trap of all. Thousands of stealth platforms that had been disguised as ice particles suddenly activated, surrounding Zephyrian ships with close-range weapons that appeared from every direction at once. These platforms worked in perfect coordination, creating overlapping fields of fire that made escape impossible. The Zephyrian battle plan, developed over centuries of successful conquests, disintegrated within minutes of first contact. Their energy weapons, designed for ship-to-ship combat at predictable ranges, proved almost useless against a defense network that was distributed throughout an entire star system. When they destroyed one weapons platform, 3 more emerged from concealment to take its place. Admiral Park Hyun-woo, commanding one of the planet-killer dreadnoughts, watched in horror as his escort vessels were systematically torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have been possible. "All ships concentrate fire on the 3rd planet," he ordered desperately. "If we can destroy their homeworld, we can end this madness." The dreadnought's main weapon, a gravitational manipulator capable of cracking planets, charged up and fired, a devastating beam toward Earth. For a moment, it seemed like the Zephyrians might salvage something from this disaster. Then the beam struck what appeared to be empty space near Earth's moon and simply vanished. The humans had constructed a gravitational lens array using technology that made Zephyrian science look primitive. The planet-killer beam was captured, focused, amplified, and redirected back at the eternal dominance with 3 times its original power. High Chancellor Veltara had exactly enough time to realize that her own ultimate weapon was about to destroy her before the redirected beam cut her flagship in half. The battle raged for 18 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The humans had spent decades studying every aspect of Zephyrian military doctrine, learning from every conquest, analyzing every tactical pattern. They had taken lessons from every war in human history, from ancient battles fought with swords and shields to modern conflicts involving nuclear weapons, and applied them on an interstellar scale. The Zephyrian survivors who managed to escape the solar system carried word of humanity's victory back to the Empire's core worlds. The species that had been mocked as primitive cave dwellers had just destroyed the most powerful fleet in galactic history, using weapons that combined ancient kinetic principles with physics so advanced that even the Empire's top scientists couldn't understand how they worked. 3 months later, Ambassador Park Min-ho returned to the crystalline chambers of Nexus Prime. But this time, she wasn't presenting humanity's case for membership in the Galactic Council. She was there to dictate the terms of the Zephyrian Empire's unconditional surrender, while human warships, sleek predators that moved through space like shadows, held position just outside the system as a reminder of what happened to those who underestimated humanity. The assembled alien representatives who had laughed so mockingly at humanity's first diplomatic mission now sat in stunned silence as Ambassador Park outlined the new galactic order. The Zephyrian Empire would be dissolved, its conquered territories granted independence, and its military leaders would stand trial for war crimes against dozens of species. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about humanity's greatest strength. It wasn't their technology, their numbers, or their industrial capacity. It was their ability to learn from every defeat, adapt to every challenge, and turn their enemies' assumptions into deadly weaknesses. Throughout human history, being underestimated had been the last mistake their opponents ever made. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun,